our Zoom recording. So we're recording. Welcome everyone. We will get started here in just a couple of minutes. Please note the message in the chat regarding a link that you can use throughout the session to ask questions that will go directly to the presenter. And also we do ask that you keep your mic muted if at all possible. And if you need to ask a question, feel free to use that regular chat window, but we do have that link available if it's something you would like to ask directly of the presenter. So again, we will get started here in just a few minutes. So we're gonna go ahead and get started to be mindful of everyone's time. So welcome to the STEM certification Q&A with the Department of Education. I'm Amanda McCammon with STEM Synergy and Keep Indiana Learning. And I'm gonna be your moderator today. Also here with us is Jake Caressel from the Department of Education. Jake currently serves as the Assistant Director of STEM and Computer Science for the Indiana Department of Education. As part of the teaching and learning team, Jake coordinates efforts to support schools and educators as they work to bring high quality STEM and computer science learning experiences to their students. Prior to his current role, Jake served as the computer science specialist for the Department of Education, a district technology and instructional coach, and a high school math and computer science teacher. There is going to be a link in the slides, just as a reminder, that you will utilize throughout the presentation for any questions that you would like to ask of the presenter. It is located in the chat box for your convenience, so you can just copy and paste that link to utilize for any questions that you may have. To touch on our agenda really quickly, we are going to go through the welcome and introductions, which just occurred. So you know who Jake is, and I, again, am with STEM Synergy and Keep Indiana Learning, have been an Indiana educator for a very long time and served at the Department of Education, actually with Jake, a couple of years ago under Dr. McCormick as the Chief of STEM and Workforce Development, and helped alongside Jake and a lot of other people for the 6-year STEM strategic plan as well. So we have some pre-submitted Q&A that you all provided when you registered. We took those questions and worked them into the slides, so we will directly answer those questions that you had. And then we also will talk a little bit about the time requirements for this year's application. And then Jake will hand it over to me and I'll talk a little bit about some upcoming help sessions that we are going to offer through Keep Indiana Learning and a few resources. So Jake, you can take it away.
Awesome, thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay and can see my slides. So like Amanda said, we're just going to take a little bit of time to go through some of these pre-submitted questions that you all and others who might not have been able to join us live submitted ahead of the session here this afternoon. And then again, just to reiterate, you should be able to see a link that you can utilize to submit some additional questions that maybe come up during our discussion this afternoon. Or some additional questions you'd like to add. And that should be visible on the screen, and also Amanda dropped it in the chat as well. So just one other thing I'll say before getting started, I just want to kind of make a point to say that really the STEM certification journey from school to school varies, and it just depends a lot on what existing structures are in place and things of that nature. And so definitely utilize these responses as a resource and as for considerations as you continue in your work in your own district, but know that it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach or solution. And so certainly there may be some additional pieces to the puzzle depending on your specific local context. So without further ado, we'll jump into some of the questions. The first one is just generally, what does the certification process look like? And so I'll take a second and just kind of walk you through step by step. So ahead of actual submission, you will dive into developing your school leadership team. We do ask that you schedule just a brief meeting with members of the STEM team here at the department, just to make sure everyone's sort of on the same page and make sure there's a clear path moving forward and any lingering questions are addressed. Then you'll take some time to collect your evidence and curate it into your Google Site application. You'll conduct a self-evaluation to get a good feel for where you currently are and some areas where you might need to collect some additional evidence or have some additional concerted effort as you're moving forward. And then something I always like to recommend is that you have an outside reviewer, someone who is external to your program and probably your school, to take a look at your application versus the evaluation rubric, just to make sure that from an outsider's perspective, that the evidence that you're curating does sort of line up with the indicators in the rubric. And I find that it's easy, to get caught up in the day-to-day of your program, and sometimes it's good to get an outside perspective before you actually submit your application. It can help with making sure it's as refined as possible before submission. And then by October 29th, which is our deadline for this year, you'll submit the link to your Google site or your pre-approved alternative using the link, which I will provide later in the presentation. And so from there, a cycle of scoring takes place with members of the STEM team from IDOE and from our STEM cadre. And then you will receive a preliminary score report. And from there, based on kind of where you fall, you'll either have the opportunity to submit additional evidence for review based on that feedback from the preliminary report. If you meet the minimum score requirements, then you would be able to move forward and schedule a site visit. And so site visits are basically a step to help verify the contents of your Google site and identify any additional evidence that might be needed. And then, so once the site visit occurs, you'll get a preliminary score and then an embargoed certification status shared by the end of the visit. And then you should receive a final score report within a week of the site visit. And again, that designation is embargoed until an official announcement made by IDOE, which I'll kind of outline the anticipated timeline for that later in the presentation here as well. The next question is, how long does the transition take from beginning to STEM certification? And generally speaking, similar to some of my opening comments, it really does depend on the school and can vary quite a bit depending on the resources that are already in place, training that might have already occurred, and things of that nature. So it really depends and varies from school to school or program to program. Generally speaking, we see schools starting the process a year, if not more, ahead of time, ahead of when they're planning to actually apply for STEM certification. And it may take a few years, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, everyone is sort of in a different place along the STEM implementation curriculum. And so it may take longer, or you may have enough in place already to sort of expedite that. So it just sort of depends. It is important to note that some of the survey and data collection requirements do take a fair amount of pre-planning just to make sure you have that in place ahead of actually applying for STEM certification. So it's just a general note to make as well as you're planning. Question 3 is, what is the best way to get started? And so certainly at the beginning of the planning phase, it's useful to build your leadership team and identify sort of who your core leadership team for STEM efforts is going to be, and hosting regular meetings so you can begin the self-assessment process based on the rubric, so you can get a feel for where you are and areas where you might need to focus your work. And then from there, it's really a matter of starting to gather and curate your evidence. And again, identifying once it gets closer to actual application time and you have everything pretty well put together, finding someone external from your team, from your school, who can take a final look and help you to make any last minute refinements before you actually submit your application. Pre-submitted question 4. What does it mean to have a STEM certified program rather than a school? Is the STEM program certification only available to high schools? So school certification is for an entire elementary, middle, or high school that meets the expectations laid out in the STEM certification rubric. And then certified programs is sort of a newer addition to the STEM certification program as a whole, and really is intended for schools that might have some form of academy model, for example, or some specific STEM program housed within a high school that meets, again, the same expectations in the rubric, but more for just the program or academy rather than for the school as a whole. And the idea is that would primarily be a focus within a high school. High schools can still certainly go after full school certification as well, though. Question 5, can I get just my program STEM certified? So just building off of the last slide there, yes, STEM programs within the high schools specifically have an option to certify just the program itself. Career and technical centers, just as an addition, also are eligible to apply for certification. But again, certainly we encourage the approach to be as holistic as possible, and so across all grade levels and buildings, certifying the building or the school as a whole is an option as well. The next question is, can an individual teacher become STEM certified? So not through this process. I will go ahead and kind of plug or let you know that there is a relatively new elementary STEM license edition that's available. And so if you are looking for an individual teacher-based sort of certification, that might be something that you look into. Certainly there are a variety of other secondary STEM-related license editions as well. There are also quite a few different professional learning communities and professional development opportunities through various platforms and programs. So I'd encourage you to take a look at some of those options if you're looking for individual development opportunities at the teacher level. And if that's something that I can help to connect you with or be a thought partner in, definitely don't hesitate to reach out to me about that. Pre-submitted question 7, does a school district need a STEM plan in order to apply? So what I'll say about this is that thoughtful planning is an integral and necessary part of the STEM certification process. The Google Sites template includes spaces for a STEM plan executive summary, a STEM plan vision statement, and a STEM plan mission statement. And so those are things that schools that are looking to go through the certification process definitely want to think about and make sure they have in place and have identified, STEM as a priority area and a place where they're looking to grow as a school and as a community. So yes, generally speaking, those components would need to be a part of your program and in place as you work towards STEM certification. Pre-submitted question number 8 is how many STEM lessons need to be taught throughout the whole school if it's already taught to all students via a related arts course each week? So just generally speaking, I think it's important to remember that because this is a school-based certification, it's certainly something that we're looking to see sort of permeating throughout the entire culture of a school, and not only be isolated within a particular class or special or something of that nature. So while a STEM rotation or related arts course is certainly great and could be part of a strategy for STEM certification, we're really looking for it to be kind of woven throughout the building as a whole. And so there are specific metrics referenced within the rubric as well when we think about frequency and things of that nature. So I'd encourage you to take a look at the rubric and for those specific metrics related to that. Pre-submitted question number 9 is our newly constructed school is applying that all of our teachers and evidence mainly came from a previously certified school. Am I on the right track? So this is a unique situation. And so if you want to have, a more specific conversation about your particular situation, I'm happy to do that. I will say that you would need to apply for the new school. The certification wouldn't just carry over from the previously certified school into a new building. And evidence would need to demonstrate how the work is occurring in the new building itself as well. So those are a few thoughts I want to throw out as a consideration there. And like I said, if you want to have a more specific conversation, I'd be happy to do that. Question number 10 is what are the look-fors during a site visit? And so, as I previously mentioned, site visits really serve as an opportunity to verify the evidence that's held within your application. And so it could vary from site visit to site visit, but just generally we're looking to get the evaluation team is looking to get sort of a firsthand experience of your STEM initiative and of the evidence that you submitted in your application, just to verify and have an opportunity to ask any final questions or for any clarifications or identify if any additional evidence might need to be put together. Question 11 is, will there be site visits this spring? We certainly hope to be able to conduct in-person site visits as we have in the past, aside from the last year or two. If in-person site visits are not possible for one reason or the other, there's a chance that site visits could be conducted virtually again, and that's something we'll just be as transparent with you as possible and be sure to give you as much notice as possible either way so that we can plan accordingly on all sides. Question number 12 is, how will we know when we are ready and worthy to apply for STEM certification? So at the end of the day, this is really a local decision. And again, it really varies for everyone. This is not sort of a one size fits all process. And so as you're thinking about whether you're ready to apply for certification, some of the questions you might consider is, how established is your programming? How long have you been working on this? Do you have the required data already collected, and are you using that data that's referenced within the STEM certification rubric? And what are your strengths and areas for improvement based on your self-assessment? So I think that self-assessment is really a key component of determining whether you're ready. Certainly you're worthy, but whether you're ready or not to apply would really, a lot of that can go back to the self-assessment and sort of thinking and reflecting on where you are as a school as related to STEM, and areas where you're doing a really great job and some other areas where you might need to continue to improve, and then sort of determining the timeline from there on how quickly you can get moving and the amount of time it would take to get some of those pieces in place. Pre-submitted question number 13 is, what does community partners / advisory council look like in different schools? Do all partners need to be from sectors in the STEM field? So the idea is that partners within your sort of advisory council or advisory board would come from a variety of perspectives. So, we're thinking industry partners, potentially other community partners, university partners. There are a lot of different ways an advisory board or community partner board could be put together. And the idea is that those partners would be able to give strategic feedback based on the current state of your plan and how to move it forward and meet the needs of your students and your communities, and then also be actively engaged in the program itself. And so there are a few different elements related to community partners and their feedback and their engagement in the STEM program within domain 4 of the rubric. So I'd recommend taking a close look at that and just letting me know if you have any questions or if any clarifications are needed. Another point I'd like to make is that the links to Google Sites of previously certified schools are available on the DOE website. So if you want to jump into those, not necessarily even specifically related to this question, but related to any question to get an idea of what maybe others are doing or ways you might be able to organize your evidence or curate your evidence. There might be ideas for types of evidence that you hadn't thought of as well. So I think that's a great resource that's available to see some of the success stories that are out there already and get an idea for how you might pull your application together or get ideas for how to continuously refine your program at your school. And then, is a STEM plan vision the same as a school vision? So not necessarily. I think it kind of depends. Certainly, again, we want to make sure that those who are thinking about STEM school certification are really thinking about things building wide. And so certainly there might be some variations there depending on the context and other initiatives that might be going on in your school. But whatever the case is, your STEM plan, your vision, your mission should sort of permeate throughout your building and be sort of a school-wide piece that you're considering as you move forward. If you have a question come up, so I'll go ahead and shift to that really quick. There was a question, do members of the advisory council need to be from the local community? I think generally speaking, the idea is that they would be local community partners who have a good feel for the context and for the needs of your community and for the needs of your students, and that might have an idea for how they can support that work. I won't say that's limited necessarily to the local community, again, just depending on your local context and what might be in your area. But I think ideally they would be in a situation where they could connect easily and have some level of understanding of the context within your school, where you're starting, where you're building toward, and things of that nature. So I guess in short, it depends a little bit, but if you have specific questions, again, don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. Happy to talk through that with you. And at this point, I know I kind of went through those questions fairly quickly. It looks like that last question I shared was the only other question that's come in, unless there's anything that's come through in just the Zoom chat. Let me check that really quick. Doesn't look like it. So feel free to, again, continue to throw questions in using the link on the screen. But I will go ahead and move forward into just some reminders about the timeline and submission and things of that nature. So The application due date itself is again Friday, October 29th by the close of business. You have to submit your Google site link via the Google form that's linked here, and that's also linked within the certification guide. And if you're having trouble finding that, let me know, and I can send you the direct link for that as well. And then some additional dates that you might want to be aware of. We're looking at having those initial reviews of applications completed by November 23rd, with preliminary score reports and feedback provided to schools by December 10th. And then from there, again, depending on whether you need to compile additional evidence or if you've already met the minimum score requirements, things might look a little different depending on where you are with that. But we will look to, schedule site visits in early spring semester of 2022, have those completed by late spring, and then again, that official announcement from IDOE, we're looking at making by May 9th of 2022. And then again, you will have an embargoed certification status by the end of your site visit, but that is just something you would need to keep within your building until the official announcement is made from DOE. And then just a general note as well that site visits are not a requirement if you're going through the recertification process. So if you certified 5 years ago and you're working on recertifying, then you will go through all these similar steps in terms of the application submission and review, but you do not have to do a site visit. And with that, I will turn it back over to Amanda, who has a couple of closing pieces before we end our session here this afternoon.
Great. Thanks so much, Jake. That's really helpful information. And just a side note, there doesn't look like there are any additional questions in the chat as well. So I think we've covered all of those. Here as we're wrapping up, feel free to go ahead and continue to use that link, and they'll still pop up in the slides for us if you have some last minute questions, or you can always drop those in the chat as well. So I wanted to hit on just a couple of options that we have coming up. They are what we're considering kind of just open help sessions, really for those schools that are looking to apply this October for kind of that last minute hurrah, last minute help, or questions that you may need answered, or if you want to just kind of run it by someone, what you're submitting, just to provide some additional assistance in questions and things that may pop up here in the next few weeks before you submit at the end of October. So those sessions will be led by me with Keeping It a Learning. And I have a couple of different times, both on the 18th and the 25th. I'm actually going to drop in the Zoom links to those sessions into the chat. So those should be in there. 2, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon on the 18th, and then same times, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon on the 25th. So please feel free to jump on those for as long as you need to. If you have something that you'd like to run by me, have a question about something, and if I can't answer that, then I will of course always connect with Jake kind of in those last few days before submission to try to get those answered for you. So again, just open sessions, feel free to share those links and hop on either of those times on either of those dates if you have some last minute questions. Jake, can you move the slide forward for me, please?
I think I did. Sorry, is it not updating on everyone's end?
Might just be lagging. Yeah, I think there's just a little bit of a lag. There we go. So this next slide is just some helpful links and resources, all of which were mentioned in the presentation by Jake. The first one there is the STEM certification evaluation rubric for this year. So that's the full rubric, right, where you can really get into the nitty gritties of the different scoring. And then the second link is that certification guide for this year that also Jake mentioned. Super helpful information in there and a bit more condensed and user friendly than like the whole full-blown rubric. So definitely take a look at those two, whether you are applying this year or you're looking at applying in the future. Very, very helpful links. The third link there is something that is specific to Keep Indiana Learning and STEM Synergy. And this is a short assessment form that was put together actually by a team of individuals and vetted by the field. When we were considered, instead of STEM Synergy, we were really under the umbrella of the Indiana STEM ecosystem. And it was a project that we did where we took the Department of Education, really the objective standards and expectations from the rubric and from the whole certification process, and crosswalk them with the out of school STEM standards from Indiana After School Network. And then we created a larger tool, but we condensed that down to a short kind of snapshot, quick 5-minute assessment that schools can use really when they're getting started in the process of considering STEM certification or just improving their overall STEM offerings. So that is something that is available out there on the STEM Synergy website through Keep Indiana Learning. If you are preparing to apply for STEM certification, it's probably not going to help you because you've already jumped in both feet into the deep end of the rubric and prepping for that certification. But if you're just getting started or considering certification in the future, or know someone that might be, this would be a great place to start just as a quick snapshot. Definitely not, and I just want to reiterate, not to be used in place of the Department of Ed rubric. It's really just a starting point to get you thinking as it relates to both the out of school time STEM standards and then the K-12 STEM expectations with the certification process and rubric and where you may stand in that space. So those links are there for you. And then lastly, we just want to thank you for attending today. You guys had some great questions. Please make sure that you take a screenshot of the chat box. So you have the links for the submission of the actual application that's due this year, as well as the dates and Zoom links for those help sessions coming up on October 18th and October 25th. To take a snapshot of that or a screenshot. And then additionally, this presentation has been recorded, and so it should be up pretty quickly in the Keep Indiana Learning on Demand library. So if you feel like you want to go back and take another look or remind yourself of some of the responses that Jake had to some of the questions, pick up those links again, it should be there fairly shortly, fairly quickly for you to access. So please feel free to reach out with questions. Both my contact information as well as Jake's are on the screen there for you. And thank you again for attending, and good luck with your application process.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Have a good day.